Welcome back. We start our news bulletin from Pakistan, which has dared India to invite Prime Minister Imran Khan to occupied Kashmir to get a reality check of who the Kashmiris truly love. Talking to media, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi also offered India's ruling BJP's leaders to visit Azad Kashmir to experience the rejection of Kashmiris. He said right now India is at loggerheads with all neighbors because of its jingoistic and expansionist actions. Qureshi slammed Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh's statement that people of Azad Kashmir fantasize about being under New Delhi's rule. Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu says Ankara is working with Moscow to establish a lasting ceasefire in Libya. Speaking alongside Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif in Istanbul, Cavusoglu said Russia and Turkey would continue talks to discuss the truce. He said there are no technical disagreements between Turkey and Russia on issues regarding the conflict in Libya. Cavusoglu and his Russian counterpart postponed planned talks on Sunday that were to focus on Libya and Syria. Touching upon other regional issues, Cavusoglu said Turkey opposes unilateral sanctions against Iran. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Zarif hailed Turkey's stance on US actions against Tehran. Turkey says it has launched Operation Claw Eagle against terrorists in northern Iraq. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said fighter jets destroyed caves used by terrorists for shelter on the first day. It said the warplanes destroyed posts of the Kurdish Workers' Party in the vicinity. The ministry said the operation is being carried out in Sinjar, Kandil, Karakek, Zab, Awasin, Basian and Hakurk regions. Officials said Operation Claw Eagle is taking place under the right of self-defense, sanctioned by international law. Israel has started preparations for building a new settlement in the occupied Golan Heights named after U.S. President Donald Trump. In a statement, the Prime Minister's office said cabinet ministers have ratified the decision. Settlements Minister Teposi Hotowe said her ministry will start preparations for Ramat Trump to house 300 families. The 30-year-old Jewish settlement is currently known as Brushim and has a population of 10 people. Israel captured the Golan Heights from Syria in the 1967 Middle East War and annexed it in 1981. The move comes weeks before Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu plans to begin annexation of the Jordan Valley and West Bank. The U.S. has recorded its lowest daily death toll from the coronavirus since March, with 330 fatalities in the past 24 hours. The death toll in the country has crossed 115,000. In Brazil, 612 more people died, taking the death toll to over 43,000. Worldwide, the death count has topped 433,000, while infections are over 7.9 million. Further details in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic is showing no signs of abating as China and South Korea combat a second wave of local infections. China has turned to mass testing and district-level lockdowns in Beijing after a jump in cases connected with a wholesale food market in the capital. US President Donald Trump is scheduled to hold a rally on June 20th, which experts warn can be extraordinarily dangerous. Meanwhile, Peru's historic peasant brigades have re-emerged to implement the lockdown amid surging cases.
We are in a tireless fight against the invisible pandemic that has been doing damage to various countries of the world. And so the peasant brigades, based on our own experiences in the 13 provinces of our region during the state of emergency, we have assumed a predominant role in what concerns territorial control.
Shops in England selling non-essential goods will reopen today for the first time in almost 3 months amid strict safety measures. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has urged people to shop with confidence. In France, President Emmanuel Macron is accelerating plans to ease the country's lockdown.
The new phase, which begins tomorrow, will allow us to accelerate the economic recovery, and we need it. I'm relying on you because we need to fully start up our economy again, all the while protecting the most vulnerable.
Australia is looking at infrastructural spending to boost its economy as the country faces its first recession in 30 years due to the pandemic.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 97 more people have died from COVID-19, taking the country's death toll to 2,729. The Health Ministry says over 5,200 tested positive in the past 24 hours, taking the infections tally to more than 144,000. The ministry said over 53,000 people have recovered across the country, while there are more than 88,000 active cases. The ministry said more than 897,000 tests have been conducted, with some 29,000 overnight. Officials said Punjab province has reported 54,000 cases and Sindh nearly 54,000. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa has over 18,000 cases, Balochistan 8,177, and the capital city of Islamabad more than 8,500. Meanwhile, the Punjab government has announced to seal the worst hit areas by coronavirus in eastern city of Lahore for 2 weeks. In other news, the Afghan government and the Taliban have agreed on Qatar's capital Doha as the venue for the first meeting in their peace talks. President Ashraf Ghani's spokesman Sadiq Siddiqui says there has not been any agreement yet on the venue of the direct talks. An expedited prisoner swap under the Doha Accord and a loosely holding Eid al-Fitr ceasefire paved the way for the talks. The intra-Afghan dialogue was originally scheduled for March in Oslo, but roadblocks and implementation of the Doha Pact delayed the process. In the U.S., the police killing of unarmed 27-year-old Black American Rashid Brooks in Atlanta has been ruled as a homicide. In a statement, the Fulton Medical County Examiner said an autopsy proved the cause of death by 2 gunshot wounds to Brooks' back. The report said Brooks died from blood loss and organ injuries caused by the wounds. District Attorney Paul Whelan says prosecutors will decide by midweek whether to bring charges against the police officers. Brooks' death reignited protests in Atlanta after days of worldwide demonstrations against racism prompted by the death of George Floyd. The UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson says there is much more needed to tackle racism in the country and around the world. This comes as Johnson announced a new commission to look at all aspects of inequality in Britain. In an article, the Prime Minister said no one who cares about England can ignore the protest against racism sparked by the killing of George Floyd. But he said the UK should not attempt to rewrite the past by removing historical symbols. Johnson said Britain's heritage should be left broadly in peace. He also condemned the involvement of far-right thugs in protests on Saturday, which led to the arrests of more than 100 people in London. Now from London, as anti-racism protests continue, right-wing protesters against the Black Lives Matter movement gathered in the city to protect public symbols of British history. Despite police warnings to stay home, videos of the demonstrators singing the British national anthem and chanting England were seen. Many gathered at a statue of the former Prime Minister Winston Churchill, calling him our own after protesters daubed racist on it last weekend. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has warned that anyone attacking public property or the police will face the full force of the law. In Russia, a Moscow court has sentenced former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan to 16 years in a high-security prison, announcing him guilty of espionage charges. Whelan has declared himself innocent and said he will appeal against the sentence. He was detained in Moscow by the Russian Federal Security Service in December 2018 on charges of spying. Whelan's defense claims he was framed after he was handed a USB drive by an unknown Russian national. He said Whelan thought the USB contained pictures from a touristic journey, while it actually had a list of employees of a classified security agency. Russia's foreign ministry said some 22 U.S. nationals are imprisoned in Russia for crimes including fraud, drug smuggling, robbery, and rape. The European Union has ruled out a transatlantic alliance against China and dismissed systematic rivalry with Beijing. In a post on his official site, Policy Chief Josep Borrell said the bloc will not pick a side in the US-China conflict. Borrell said the European style of diplomacy focuses on multilateralism and cooperation. This comes ahead of a video conference of the bloc's 27 foreign ministers with US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. The meeting is expected to focus on US allegations of disinformation on Beijing. It will follow the first EU-China summit next week. Pakistan's Air Force has paid rich tribute to war veteran group captain Saiful Azam, who breathed his last in Bangladesh yesterday. Air Chief Marshal Mujahid Anwar Khan acknowledged his gallantry during the 1965 Indo-Pak and 1967 Arab-Israel wars. Khan expressed heartfelt grief on the veteran's demise. He said Saif was an exceptional fighter pilot who will always be remembered for his valor and professionalism. The late group captain Saiful Azam also attained global repute when he shot down 3 Israeli aircraft during 1967 Arab-Israel war. In recognition of his heroic contributions, he was honored with military awards by the governments of Jordan and Iraq. The US government also bestowed upon him the title of Living Eagle in 2001. Pakistan has announced to start manufacturing its own COVID-19 diagnostic kits for commercial use. Minister for Science and Technology Fawad Chaudhry says the kit has been approved by the Drug Regulatory Authority of Pakistan. In an interview, Chaudhry said locally manufactured kits will considerably bring down the cost of coronavirus testing in the country. He said the kit was developed by experts at the National University of Science and Technology with more than 90% accuracy. The minister was also hopeful about developing domestic ventilators within the next few weeks. He said clinical trials of 4 machines have already entered their final phase. We're now taking a short break, but coming up we have food trash harmful for water resources. Bot uses ultraviolet light to kill viruses. Welcome back. The UN says it is appalled by the raids and attacks by militants that killed 60 people in Nigeria. 20 soldiers and 40 civilians were killed in twin attacks by militants in northeastern Borno state. Fighters attacked Mangunu, a garrison town where the UN and other aid workers are based, and a village in Nanganzai. In a statement, the UN confirmed that non-state armed group operatives entered Mangonu on Saturday morning. It said security measures prevented any harm to the over 50 aid workers who were in the facility at the time of the attack. The Boko Haram and its allied faction, calling itself the ISWAP, claimed responsibility for the attacks. In Turkey, 1 person has died and 18 others were injured after an earthquake of 5.7 magnitude jolted the eastern Bengal province. The Disaster and Emergency Management Authority said the quake struck the Karliova district. Officials say a guard died and 3 others were injured after 2 observation towers of the police station collapsed in Kyanpianar village. Rescue officials said none of the injured are critical. The earthquake also partially damaged 10 houses in El Mali and the Narbe villages of Yedisu district. In Iran, an earthquake measuring 5.1 on the Richter scale jolted Bayram district south of Fars province. According to the National Seismological Center of the Institute of Geophysics, the earthquake's epicenter was 16 kilometers deep. It struck 17 kilometers from Bayram city and 24 kilometers from Lamad. No casualties have been reported so far. Iran sits on major fault lines that are prone to near daily earthquakes. In Myanmar, a local resident has started using food trash as compost to transform it into organic fertilizer. He is not only contributing to environmental protection, but also earning handsome income. Let's find out more in this report.
Food trash is equally harmful for the environment as is the plastic and other metal waste. Recycling waste is usually considered the reprocessing of plastic and other metals. But in Myanmar, a local has come up with a unique idea of transforming food waste into organic fertilizer. In Yangon, up to 2,500 tons of waste are produced every day, mostly from homes and restaurants. Inda Aung So has learned to transform food waste into organic fertilizer.
When we talk about recycling trash, most people see only plastic and other metals. Most are not aware of organic trash. This organic waste also causes damage to the environment at the same level as the plastic does. The food waste is kind of contributing factor affecting global warming and climate change.
So he is not only contributing to environment protection but also earning a decent income. He believes his business is about to grow as some large hotels and private schools have also begun buying his products.
People think that food waste is just trash. It is difficult for me to introduce the idea to the public that food waste is a natural resource. But I am seeing a bright future for our jobs because some big hotels and private schools are buying my products and they want to change their trash systems. I'm firmly confident that my job will become successful even though we have had difficulties at the beginning.
Inda Aung So said it is difficult to convince public that food waste is a natural resource. He has produced a huge amount of fertilizer and expects to increase the capacity in a few years.
Mira Robotics has developed its Yugo robot to reinforce Japan's shrinking workforce. But as the coronavirus threat persists, the Japanese startup is offering its machine as a tool in the fight against the outbreak. Details in this report.
For better or worse, robots are going to replace many humans in their jobs, and the coronavirus outbreak is speeding up the process. Mira Robotics Ugo is a pair of height-adjustable robotic arms mounted on wheels, operated remotely through a wireless connection with a laptop and game controller. It is being used for coronavirus-related demand.
We have been receiving many inquiries from overseas, including Singapore and France, about how it can be used for coronavirus.
The latest feature of the so-called Avatar robot is a hand attachment that uses ultraviolet light to kill viruses on door handles.
Originally, we didn't intend on having the sterilizing function, but as people began to practice social distancing and avoiding the 3 C's, the robot gained a lot of attention, and we have received many inquiries because it can go to places and operate on its own instead of humans. So we decided to develop the UVC sterilization band.
Ugo, which costs around $1,000 a month to rent, can be deployed as a security guard, while it can carry out equipment inspections and clean toilets and other areas in office buildings. The 2-year-old startup so far has only one Ugo operating at an office building in Tokyo.
Stocks in Europe are trading lower as concerns over a second wave of coronavirus cases dominate market sentiment. Investors are also wary of a probable surge in COVID-19 due to anti-racism protests. London's FTSE 100 fell nearly 1.5%, while Germany's DAX lost over 1.5%. France's CAC 40 slipped over 1.5%. The Stocks Europe 600 lost. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.